of paper, if you have a pen, I want you to write what you think the greatest song ever written is. Now, I guess you probably would say that's your favorite song.
The greatest song?
Song, S-O-N-G. The greatest song ever written. It does not have to be a church song, just the greatest song ever written. You got to pick one.
I guess we're gonna have to explain it, right?
Yeah. First of all, I did not let you keep the jar of beans because that's going to be supper probably at our house sometime later on this week. 910 beans.
You got some little ones in there too.
I didn't promise what size they were. I just said beans. 910. So who has the closest guess? Would somebody like to start volunteering?
978.
What'd you got?
978.
978. He is 68 beans off. Too much, but pretty good guess. Anybody got something closer?
How many was it?
910. Okay. James wins. Nothing, but James wins. 910 beans.
I think in beans.
I told you, that's our supper later on sometime. No, you can't have the beans. What Diane does with pinto beans and ham grease, bacon grease, is a culinary art. It is something to not mess with. So, 910. Okay. There's a reason why that jar is like it is. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Let me ask the question first. What would have made it a little easier to guess the number of beans?
See through.
If you could see through it. I picked a little plastic jar on purpose that you couldn't see through. You
Yeah,
could.
it ain't consistently the same size.
So, you've raised a garden. If you ever get a bean pod that's got all the little beans in there the same size, let me know.
It don't get
There's another reason why the little jar is like it is. It's tapered. If you could count the number of beans on the bottom, and then you'd kind of hold it up and count about how many rows there would be, you could multiply and get a pretty good guess. But it's tapered. So the number of beans on the bottom is not the same as the number of beans on that top layer. So let's talk about a song. The greatest song in the history of the world, I'm the teacher so I get to say so, is Rocky Mountain High by John Denver. When Rocky Mountain High by John Denver comes on the radio, the computer, the whatever at our house, time stops. Nobody's allowed to speak. The clock has to stop ticking. I've not yet gotten Sully to understand this, that he can't bark during Rocky Mountain High. But that's the greatest song ever written. Now, how many of you have a song close to Rocky Mountain High? What's the difference in the two questions I have asked you? Think about it.
Well, one's purely speculative,
Okay, which one?
the song.
The songs. Total opinion, speculative.
One lends itself to algorithms.
I love that word, algorithm. Named from a Persian mathematician, Al-Khwarizmi. And also how we get the word algebra, which means to calculate. All right?
It has an absolute. The jar has an absolute. There's absolutely an exact number of
Okay.
beans.
Could you see exactly through the jar? No. But do you have something to go on? What do you have to go on? Well, the size of the jar. I mean, you know there are not 10,000 beans in that jar. And you can kind of see through it. I noticed some people picking it up. James did that. James picked it up and kind of went like this. So you've got something to go on. Is it complete?
No.
No. But something to go on. 1 Corinthians 13:12. Would somebody, and I'm taking this slightly out of context, I admit that. Would somebody read 1 Corinthians 13:12?
For now we see in a mirror, dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I will know fully, just as I also am fully known.
I see through something dimly. I know in part. I have something to go on. I can't see everything. But there will be a time when what?
To be clear.
Everything will be clear. Now, at that time, when everything is clear, and you can see, and you know exactly, is that faith? Bill says no. Bill's got to explain that. I told you last week, if you volunteer, if you don't want to get asked questions tonight, you better keep your mouth shut. Because if you volunteer, you're going to have to. There was a very famous movie back in the 1990s about a math teacher in Los Angeles called Stand and Deliver. You answer tonight, you've got to stand and deliver. Chemistry teacher, you need to find that movie. Stand and deliver. It will change the way you teach science or math, I guarantee you. So, Bill?
Whatever is a matter of sight, why do you yet hope for it?
That's right. And Paul explained that in Corinthians as well. Paul explained that if you see and you know completely, then what you know is not faith. Faith comes in when you don't know completely. Now, I don't know whether you had a little bit of faith in your answer about the number of beans or whether you just wrote something down just to placate the teacher. I have no idea. But maybe you had a little bit of faith based on about how big you know a pinto bean is and how give me a moment. What was I saying? Faith. Maybe you had a little bit of faith for your answer. Maybe. Okay. So, I want you to ask one more time. Very important question. I did not come up with this activity. I borrowed it, well, let's just say I stole this from a professor in a seminary that asks this of graduating students. And it's like a master's exam. He asked the one question. Think about your faith and how you determine your faith. Is your faith determined more like the number of beans that you wrote down, or is your faith determined more like the favorite song that you wrote down? Is your faith determined by, and by the way, in that particular seminary, way more than half, a very large majority of the students say my faith is like the song that I picked up. But what does that mean then about your faith? What does that mean? If your faith is like the favorite song that you picked out, what does that mean about your faith?
Your faith may not be like mine.
That's true.
It's based on how you feel.
Based on how you feel, which basically, Cody, means your faith is baseless, opinionated. How many times have you heard somebody, when the Bible is mentioned or religious discussion or a topic comes up, they say, well, I just feel like, stop. Do you realize that the phrase, I just feel like,
That's a killer.
is an automatic defeat in a debate? And I'm not saying we turn every discussion into a debate. Please don't. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that if you're trying to establish a groundwork for what you believe, then when you say, well, I just feel like, all right, I feel like the Yankees are going to win the World Series this year. Do I have anything to support that? Absolutely nothing.
You're a Yankee fan.
But that's it. And why am I a Yankee fan? Because I grew up watching Mickey Mantle. I'm a Yankee fan simply because, young folks, you don't understand the impact. In fact, unless you're my age, you don't understand the impact of Mickey Mantle. You were either, when I was growing up, a Willie Mays fan, a Gil Hodges fan, or a Mickey Mantle fan. That was it.
And like just a little bit with Roger Maris, he showed up there, but he wasn't a Mickey
No,
Mouse.
no, and the Yankees never accepted him because he wasn't Mickey Mantle. In fact, when he hit the 61 home runs that year, or when he beat, Babe Ruth's record, the Yankee fans hated him for it because he wasn't Mickey Mantle, and Mickey Mantle was supposed to do that. So why am I a Yankee fan? Because Mickey Mantle was the king of that generation, and I grew up watching Mickey Mantle, so I grew up a Yankee fan. So why do I think the Yankees are going to win the World Series? Because I'm a Yankee fan. Basically groundless. What would you call that? Would you call that hope?
Skewed judgment.
Skewed judgment? I guess in a way you could say that's hope.
If you were to take all the statistics for every one of the players on the Yankees team and add them all up, their team's batting average, how many bases they stole, how many home runs they hit, and then do all the people they had to play the same way, you probably could feed that into a computer and see who would be most likely to go back.
Yeah, and
It's not gonna be correct.
the Yankees were supposed to beat the Dodgers last year in 5 games.
Yeah,
That didn't happen.
that didn't happen.
That's what makes baseball so unique.
So we looked last week at 2 times when Jesus was amazed. The only 2 times where it says that Jesus was amazed. Actually, the only 2 times in the Bible that says God was amazed. And both had to do with faith. One had to do with the faith of the centurion, who showed faith when it was not expected. And the other had to do with the people in Jesus' own hometown, which did not show faith when we would say that it should have been expected. And in both times, Jesus says, I'm amazed. I'm amazed at the amount of faith. I'm amazed at the lack of faith. Okay. So my question is, all right, that's nice. What is Christian faith?
Repeat that.
What is Christian faith? Go ahead and quote the scripture. Everybody's dying to quote it.
Believe in faith, not see.
What? Go ahead. What is it? Hebrews 11:1. What does Hebrews 11:1 say?
Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen.
Okay. Now, you can read the English Standard Version, the King James Version, the New King James Version, the American Standard Version, and you're going to find slightly different reading. They all mean basically the same thing. Okay.
But one thing only.
And it says that substance, some versions say the substance, some versions say the essence, some versions say the foundation of things hoped for, some versions say the evidence of things not seen. Okay. What does that mean?
That means,
All right, hang on. I got to put him on the spot.
Okay, put him on the spot.
What does
Put him on
that
the
mean?
spot, Marcus.
The conviction of things not seen.
I'm going to stand over here. So, there you go. I'm saying that because I spent half the time on camera where all we saw was that arm last week. And there was nobody back there moving the camera. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You are fully convinced on things that you do not perceive with your eyes.
Okay. You're fully convinced about things that you cannot see with your eyes. What keeps an airplane in the air? You can't talk because you'll know this. What keeps an airplane in the air?
resist.
Lift.
What's lift?
Lift is the upward pressure of the air
Against the
against the wings because it's
Only if the wing
It's moving.
is in a certain shape. If you think of an airplane wing, if you think of an airplane wing, here's the airplane wing. The top is curved and it comes down to a slope. I'm letting this be the front of the wing and that be the back. The top is curved and then it comes down to a slope and it meets the bottom. The bottom is flat. Okay? Now let me ask you this. If you have two runners and they're on a track. Now the inside, if it's an oval track, the inside of the oval track is shorter. The outside of the oval track is longer. Those of you that run track know that. So if you're the runner on the inside, you have a shorter distance to cover. If you're the runner on the outside, you have a longer distance to cover. Let's say you got two runners side by side. They start, boom, at the gun, whoopity, whoopity, whoopity. They go around the track. Here they come, and they cross the finish line at exactly the same time. Which run ran faster?
The one on the, not the inside line, the one next to it.
Because they had to cover a greater distance in the same amount of time. Okay? Air, if it covers a greater distance in the same amount of time, has less pressure. So you've got less pressure pushing down, and you've got more pressure pushing up. That's wind. That's lift. Now, can you see it? Have you ever flown in a plane? You don't see it, but you sure do hope about it real heavy, don't you? Because when that plane takes off, you're going to hope it doesn't fall out of the sky. What keeps it from falling out of the sky? The wind. Can you see the wind? No. So what did you say? It is
Fully convinced.
fully convinced in something you can't see. That pilot, that crew, those passengers, the airplane designer is fully convinced that something's going to happen but they can't see it. That's faith. So, is Christian faith, based on that passage that he read in Hebrews 11:1, is Christian faith groundless?
No.
No. So it is being fully convinced, but it's not a wishy-washy, well, I hope, well, I think, well, it's my opinion, well, I really hope this happens. It is a what? It's being convinced based on something,
Evidence.
on some kind of evidence, something you know, even if you don't know it completely. Because if you knew it completely, it wouldn't be faith. It would be sight, according to Paul. So even though you don't know every little detail, it is a complete conviction based on evidence. There's a very famous physicist. Well, he's not so famous anymore, but there's a very famous physicist that 10 years ago was going around the talk show market and making a big name for himself, actually big bucks for himself, telling how Christianity is not scientific. Well, okay, it depends on how you want to define scientific. How Christianity is not rational. You shouldn't believe in Christianity. Christianity is just a myth. Got no reason to believe in myths. Why? Because there's no empirical evidence. What is empirical evidence?
Just stuff that you put your hands on and lay eyes on.
Measure. Yes. Empirical evidence. There's no empirical evidence. All right. You completely missed the point. Are there things that we believe in, strongly trust in, but you can't see, you can't measure? There was a debate, University of Alabama, two very, very intelligent men, one an apologist, one an atheist. And Bill, I think you remember us talking about this. They were talking about this very fact, and the atheist was saying, well, you can't know anything that you can't measure. And the apologist looked at him and said, does your wife love you? And you heard this long silence.
Then you ask, did you have faith in that?
Do you have faith in that? And there's an equal long silence. Quickly, the topic changed to something else.
The other guy says, let's talk about somebody else's wife. Not mine.
So, Bob, in a court of law, does every evidence have to be something that you can pick up, physically hold, measure, look at, feel, see the texture, hear, whatever?
No.
Why?
Well, because testimony.
Testimony.
Can be entered as evidence. And even in the Bible says the witnesses are two or three people.
Yes. Yes. So, Christian faith. Let's go to the second part of that verse. Hebrews 11:1. What does it say? It says that substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. Okay?
For by it the elders obtained a good report.
Yes. All right. There are three words I want you to look at. One, and I have this on this handout sheet. So the first one, we're going to look at 1 Peter 3:15. And if you don't want to turn there, I've got it quoted on the bottom of the first page. We can all probably quote this ourselves. Peter says, always be ready to do what?
Give an answer.
Give an answer. Some versions say give a reason, give a response. Always be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks you about the hope you have. Now, that word hope that is used there is the same Greek word as the word hope that's in Hebrews 11:1, that it says that faith is a hope, but it's not just any kind of hope. It's a hope that has some substance to it. Okay? But I want to look at that word answer, or reason. Give a reason, give an answer. That is, and this has been noted many times, that word in Greek is apologia, is where we get the word apology, and it does not mean you're apologizing for anything. It means you're giving a defense. When a defense lawyer stands up in court and says that no, Clayton did not rob this bank because Clayton was at school that day, and I can prove Clayton was at school that day because he's got 120 crumb grabbers that will admit that he was their teacher that day. So he couldn't have robbed the bank at 11 in the morning. When the lawyer is providing that defense, that lawyer is providing an apology. Well, what does Peter say? Anybody that comes up and asks you, what? Ask you what?
Why you believe?
Why you believe. For the reason, not just why, the reason why you believe.
And you can't say, I'm about to say something.
So,
He's not asking you what you believe.
he's not asking you what to believe. He says, why do you believe? Why do you believe Christianity? That word is apologia, and it means to give a logical, rational defense. Okay? So let's look at Hebrews, I think this is 11:6, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Would somebody read Hebrews 11:6?
You got a deal?
And I think on my handout sheet, I actually wound up cutting that out. So
I've got it.
go ahead, Bob. 11:6.
But without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who
Oh,
comes,
I have it. Go ahead, Bob. I'm sorry.
for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is reward of those who diligently seek him.
Faith is the Greek word pistos. And it's used 243 times in the New Testament. It's used all those 243 times about the very same way. And again, Greek was much more expressive than English. And I know we have all grown up and we've heard 1,000 sermons about the different words that the Greeks used for love. I love blackberries. I love old John Wayne movies. I love my children. I love my wife. Now, those are 3, 4 different things, but they all use the same word, love, because in English we only have that one word. And the Greeks had 4. A love of family, a love of brother, a love of just general love, and a supreme love, agape, which we like to talk about. But they had expressive words for other things as well. Faith is one of them. And the Greeks had a word for just hopeful wishing. And then they had a word for faith based in concrete. And that's this word. 243 times. Faith used in the New Testament is the word that means it's founded, it's certain, it's in concrete. We say it's written in stone. It's going to happen. And that's the word that's used here. So what I want you to do is I want you to think of this word pistos, a concrete faith, a faith that's going to happen. I want you to think of the word apologia. Give a reason why you have this faith. And in Hebrews 11:1, that word substance is elenchus. And it's evidence based on questioning. There is a form of teaching called Socratic teaching. And in Socratic teaching, you don't really tell somebody what they need to know. In Socratic teaching, you start asking questions. Very hard form of teaching. It takes a lot of experience. It takes a lot of planning and thinking about what those questions are going to be. But this is a faith, a knowledge, a conviction based on questioning. Now I want you to put all of that together. So what is faith? What is Christian faith? It is a logical, evidence-based, rational conclusion, also based on questioning. What do you question? That's interesting.
The validity.
The validity. All right. And I mentioned this last week. Our time, we've only got like 3 minutes.
Are you kidding?
Well, I don't know. That clock is fast. Maybe we have 5.
Ignore it.
No, I can't ignore it. We've got to get folks home. It's too cold.
You want Randy up, you gotta go around.
We've got little ones that got to get home. It's going to get too cold to keep everybody here late tonight. What do you question? What is we mentioned this last week, what is the one central question in the whole gospel that if we can't defend that, we might as well go home?
Resurrection.
The resurrection. So my question tonight, we're not going to finish this lesson tonight either, but that's fine. This is the central lesson in this whole series. Can you defend the resurrection?
Yes.
Can you defend the resurrection without opening up the Bible?
Yes.
Bob, you've opened your mouth. Do it.
Yeah, buddy.
Okay.
I am the doubter. So I'm going to tell you right now, I'm the doubter. Go ahead.
Just, we're not putting the Bible completely out of it.
Okay.
Looking from a historical standpoint,
Who's writing the history?
a lot of different people. I couldn't name any of them right off the top of my head, but
Josephus.
what?
Josephus.
Joe Famous, yeah, he was one of them.
Josephus was let's just say he was not necessarily an accurate historian. But go ahead.
But anyway, the 12 disciples, all after being with Jesus, after he was crucified, all of them continued on and were beaten many times, and all of them, but I think but one, was killed for their faith. And they would not have died for a lie if they
Okay.
were hoaxing folks.
I'll accept that. If I know that something I believe in is a complete lie, then when it comes right down to it, and a gun is put to my head, I'm probably going to say, no. Cody, what would you do? If you knew something was a complete lie, but you went around preaching it, and then finally somebody said, look, I'm going to blow your brains out if you don't recant, what would you do? Recant. Because why?
It's a lie.
It's a lie.
Now, adding to what Bob said, right quickly, that start has continued for over 2,000 years, been martyr after martyr for Christianity, and it's here with us today. Most nothing of any kind of a religion or government or anything else has been able to last 2,000 years and continue
Okay.
on a historical view.
What about, you said, other writers? Okay. Now, I'm just going to throw this out. And I know we don't have every scrap of parchment, every scroll, everything that was written 2,000 years ago. I know a lot of it's been destroyed. But of the documents, of the written work, they're called autographs. Of the written work from 2,000 years ago. Is there any writer who said, no, 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 this did not happen?
Well, Pliny had to write a letter to Caesar,
And Pliny
Explain
hated,
what to do with
and
the
Pliny
scripture.
hated Christians.
and he hated Christians.
But he admitted,
He told basically what their services were like, and that it was about this one called Jesus.
and he admitted that this one called Jesus was said to have been risen from the dead.
Right.
And Pliny hated Christians. In fact, there are Jewish scribes, not living in Jerusalem, but not far from Jerusalem, who wrote, do you remember in the New Testament where it says that Jesus was seen by many people, as many as 500 at one time after he was resurrected? There are Jewish scribes that admit to that, and we have their written statements still to this day. And there are many other reasons why you can point and say the resurrection is not just some fancy story. The resurrection is a fact.
It has to be, or we have no hope.
And Paul says if it's not, forget Christianity. I'm going back to Judaism. This is all ridiculous if the resurrection is not a fact. We will continue here next week. Our time is over. I appreciate the response. We're going to dig a little deeper into what Christian faith, when it says that you can't please God without faith, and it tells us what in Hebrews 11:1 what faith is. We want to dig a little deeper into what the Christian faith is all about. Thank you.
Turn it off.
So, of course, one of the things that is borne out by this matter of what is faith, what is Christian faith, is that faith is always active. Faith, the faith that we're talking about, has reached certain conclusions based on certain kinds of evidence that leads a person to do something. If they're not, it doesn't really lead them to that conclusion if they're not going to do something when they're supposed to be looking at it and determining if it's something valid and something right. So faith is always a part of that movement. Like in Hebrews 11:23, when Moses was born, at the age of 3 months, his parents hid him, right? Put him in a basket. Remember all that? Because they had faith. By faith, his parents did this, because he was a goodly child, and they were not afraid of the command of the king, because they had faith. Well, what does that mean? They put him in a basket, and they had faith about what? They had faith about this child. I think they must have known something about this child. They had faith about what would happen. Basically, that God would see to him, take care of him. And so, of course, we know the rest of the story. You know, Moses winds up with an adopted mother, who is Pharaoh's wife. And so she comes down there at the river, takes him, raises him, gives him the best education available on the planet at that time. All of those kinds of things. And then what does Moses do? It came into his heart to visit his people. So that's what he did. The faith that his parents had was rewarded. In Hebrews chapter 11, that's basically the theme. Look at all the people that lived by faith, and you see what happened to them. As a result of maybe their sacrifices, there was a reward that occurred. There was something special that happened because they did it. Their faith was active. I sat in a court setting one time. I was supposed to be called as a kind of a character witness at some point in the trial of a man. But I noticed that when they were picking the jury, they would ask all the prospective jurors, are you a practicing, do you have a religion? Yes, what is it? Then they would say, Methodist or Baptist or Catholic or whatever. Are you a practicing Christian? Some would hold up their hands, some would say they were, some didn't. Faith is always active. And if the reality of Christ, the resurrection, God, the message of the Word is something that impacts your heart enough and you're moved to understand that and realize what your lot in this world is going to be like without Christ, it'll move you to do something. It will move you to repent. It will move you to acknowledge that Christ is the Son of God. It will move you to accept baptism and immersion in water for the remission of sins because of His word, not yours. Because your act is one of faith. His act was not a matter of faith. His act was a matter of reality. Tonight, if you've got some kind of questions that you really would like to express or ask about, maybe this isn't the night